So, and now Roberta Metsola, the newly elected President of the European Parliament. She is only the third woman in office after Simone Veil's 79 after the first European election and Nicole Fontaine, French from 1909 to 2002. And now Roberta Metsola, she is the youngest president ever. She had 458 votes from 705, including her own vote. And this is quite comfortable. And congratulations, Madam President. Thank you very much for joining us. It's an honor and a privilege to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very excited and happy to be here.
So, as you are the female president, only the third one at that time, does the European Parliament needs to become more feminine, younger? Will it become now with you? Is it a plan? Is it your plan?
I think first of all, it does matter. As you said in your introductory remarks, it had been 20 years since the last time the European Parliament elected a woman. And I promised in my introductory speech that I would do everything to make sure that not another 20 years pass before another woman gets elected president of this Parliament. So I think it matters inside and also outside, because this Parliament is seen by so many parliaments around the world as being a leader in this regard and also pushing forward gender equality. But it's not only about image. A lot still needs to be done in order to ensure that we have equality in our societies, that we make sure that everybody has equal opportunity. And that is what this Parliament is very strong on. And it's one thing that I will push throughout my mandate of 2.5 years. So
tell me, is the election result is a sign that Europe is now ready for gender equality? Do you think so? Do you need a quotation for that or something? Diversity, as a matter of fact?
Yeah. Well, I think it's something of a privilege and an honor that this Parliament chose a woman, a young woman, and again for the first time in
the youngest
20
ever,
years.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It is something that I think we need to show that it can happen. And it's something that has brought a lot of enthusiasm inside the House. But my mandate is now to look beyond that House and go into every single capital of the European Union. And as we have called it, burst through the Strasbourg and Brussels bubble and prove that it can happen. And that if you dream of something, if you come from a country that is looking to Europe because it protects and gives you those values and standards and quality of life that your parents, your generations before you worked so hard to guarantee for you, then let's say the world is full of opportunity. Our role as legislators is to make sure that everybody gets that opportunity. And if that means more gender equality, where we are still far away from achieving it in other parliaments at national member state level, then I hope to be a part of bringing that and pushing that forward.
Okay, let me come back to this bubble in a minute, but first of all, I want to quote from your, as you mentioned yourself, introductory speech, Democracy for All, the youth, people in cities as well as rural area. You want to bring back faith in and enthusiasm for Europe. Why do you think this enthusiasm has disappeared? Too much legislation, regulation?
No, rather than that, first of all, the pandemic has led to, let's say, people looking at institutions with a little bit less visibility than they used to have before. So it's now our opportunity, mid-mandate, to get back on track, precisely to push forward that legislation that you just mentioned, because it is the laws. Sometimes people forget that this European Parliament is one of lawmakers, that we are adopting decisions that affect each and every of our citizens' lives. It is how we decide on them, how we listen to what we should decide on, and essentially how we communicate. I was vice president of the European Parliament before I was elected president, and my role was one of relations with national parliaments. And the enthusiasm I saw when I visited a capital city, a town, and any commune in the European Union, you could see when you go to a school that people want to know about the European Union. People want to ask questions, and more importantly, people want to seek assurances that those values and principles that they share, we share, so that in 2024, when the next elections come around, my job and my colleagues' job, 704 colleagues of mine, is to make sure that this parliament is seen as something worth fighting for, is seen as something worth voting for. Because if you don't vote, then somebody else is going to take the decisions for you, and you might not like those decisions. That is my ultimate responsibility as a political representative, and there is a very, very big constructive center in this House that believes the same.
But how do you bring the EU closer to the younger generation? You know, as a mother of 4 children, you have to explain them why the EU matters, really matters. So how do you do this?
Yes, I can tell you, my eldest son will vote for the first time in 2024. And so I'm having a very domestic discussion about why the EU
about
matters.
The Spitzenkandidaten system?
I think I'll first have to start explaining what that word is, and that's not only difficult for
it's
my
common.
son,
Now it's common in the EU Spitzenkandidaten system.
So I think that one of the first things that you need to give is something for them to fight for. So if you look at my generation, I come from the so-called Erasmus generation, that we looked beyond our immediate country's borders, joined people from, at the time, 9 aspiring EU member states, and could travel, work, study freely across the European Union. How do we recapture that sense of belief where, as you say, yes, it's becoming, we are facing an increasingly more skeptical, more cynical audience. But the easiest thing would be for us to stay in those bubbles and not look outside them. I have a responsibility, my colleagues have a responsibility, and it's to go to each and every part of the European Union. It is happening in other fora, for example, with the Conference on the Future of Europe. I have seen fantastic events, such as the European Youth event in the European Parliament in Strasbourg. But at the same time, what I want to make sure is that teachers in every high school teach their students what the European Union is all about, teach their students where our history has led to us being around the same table and looking forward with the big climate challenges, migration challenges, digital challenges. What are we going to do to make the life of those students in that classroom better?
But I just mentioned the Spitzenkandidaten system. I know the word is common now in the EU, not only to explain it, but do you think the next president of the Commission should be elected by the Spitzenkandidaten system this time, really?
This is a discussion that is taking place not only within the Conference on the Future of Europe, but also within the Parliament corridors and the relevant committees. Same thing is happening, for example, about the transnational list. What I can tell you is that I will always support, besides the majority position of this Parliament, but also a position that makes Europe more visible, more transparent and accountable to the citizens. Where that will lead us in the next few months, maybe perhaps I'll need to come back to the next conference and see where we're
yes.
at. But yes,
I'll take it. Yeah, okay.
Are you taking me up on that?
It's a deal. Okay.
Ask me that question in a year's time and we'll be able to answer maybe clearer.
Okay. Another quote. This year is dedicated to the youth and that we must listen to them, you said. Okay, do we need a voting age of 16 to be more democratic?
I come from a country where the decision was taken to give votes to young people at the age of 16. There was a big discussion as to whether this was a good or bad idea. I remember being very clear about that myself, because I was surprised at the enthusiasm and actually the turnout of young people who are given the possibility, after they are given so many other possibilities in society, also to vote and choose their own candidates. Now, naturally, this is a member state competence, and I wouldn't dare to tell what other member states should do, but I can report a very positive experience from my own country.
So is it your proposal for a more democratic EU? Is it one of your proposals? You can tell us all if you want to.
I mean, absolutely.
We take them all.
In most groups that I meet, aged between 16 and 18, again, these are the youth that are either already voting or will vote in the next election. This is always a question that comes up, and it is a question that never surprises me. If anything, it proves to me that there is that enthusiasm because people want to be given the possibility to choose. Let's not forget, it is the youth and the young people of today that have shown us and also pushed us and continue to push us, and rightly so, towards acknowledging that the climate emergency is something that we ourselves have to address, and not wait until they are older for them to be able to address it, because it's too late for that.
Yeah, but again, are you proposing the age of 16 for voting in the EU, in the whole EU? Is that a proposal you will make?
Yeah, I would definitely be around any table and say, let's look at that and consider it seriously.
Okay. The youth wants more ambitions in fighting climate change. Are you following their democratic demand? Are you as a person and as a president?
I think, first of all, as I just said...
More ambition. It's not fighting...
First of all, this is a parliament that has a track record of being more ambitious than not only national parliaments, but in Brussels, where I'm sitting today, in pushing the other institutions, the European Commission and also member state governments, to be even more ambitious. This parliament had much more ambitious targets, and it is those targets also that I voted for and that I joined colleagues in calling for. Is that enough? No, it is not enough. It also has to translate, first of all, into legislation that is implemented, into legislation that does not allow in more marginalization in our society, that is communicated better, that is more effective, but also that leaves no one behind. And this is the fundamental question that we are asking. Yes, we have to be ambitious, and we should be ambitious, and we should reach those targets, while also looking at, in this, if I can call it, post-pandemic recovery period, a situation where we have look at our societies, see the opportunities that we have, but also where we still lag behind and are going to suffer for a long time during this recovery. Again, when I say suffer, I think we should invert that and transform that into opportunity. And that, in fact, is what the Recovery and Resilience Facility and the Next Generation EU funds, that was also an ambitious decision taken by the European Union and in this Parliament, in order to make sure that that recovery, and a big chunk of it, goes actually into the green transition. And I think there's the ambition for you.
And now I get back to your word of the bubbles. You said you want to move European politics out of the bubbles in Brussels and Strasbourg. And how do you want to make this happen?
I think presence is key. This is something that this parliament has suffered from this past 2 years, that of visibility. More than half of the members of this house are new, which means that when they came in 2019, almost immediately we entered the pandemic phase. And I think that this is a moment that we have an opportunity, first of all, to learn what we lost during the pandemic, but also the opportunities that we have learned, also in communicating in a more effective way. But I think nothing can replace the physical presence of a president or a vice president or a member of the European Parliament sitting around all sectors of society and saying, this is what I can do. Now, I would need to listen to you to make sure I can deliver what you want from me. My experience to date has been very positive. And in fact, one of the first things that I'm looking to do is precisely to come to Germany to do exactly that.
You mentioned it. What would you say are the biggest learning effects for the European Parliament when it had to switch into a hybrid mode during the pandemic? Voting from a distance or organizing majorities via Zoom? What's the main topic?
Pre-pandemic, this talk or discussion that we are having would have been much more difficult to organize. What we have learned, and also the Parliament has been at the forefront of developing a state-of-the-art, one of its own, actually unique system in the world, when you can switch completely online and discuss, vote, speak to each other, negotiate in a hybrid mode in all the official languages of the European Union. That is no small feat, and it is something that actually has brought other international parliaments which use different languages to look at the model we use. And this is the hybrid system that we are looking at as we emerge from this new normal, so to speak, into the next few months, where we will need to adapt, use the opportunities in order to become more modern, but essentially more efficient and effective. This is something that a lot of colleagues in this this House are asking for, without at the same time, of course, losing the solemnity of Parliament by making sure this Parliament remains a Parliament, and also understanding that certain negotiations, especially at the very end of a legislative process, require people that are finding each other in the corridor or across a table to hammer out the latest details.
So you mentioned people in rural areas. You want to connect them to the EU, to the Parliament. How will you do that? Rural areas.
Well, first of all, I think that no one in the European Union should feel too far away. And in this period, first of all, when we are discussing the green agenda, we are discussing the digital transformation, making sure that everybody living in every corner of Europe has equal rights. At the moment, for example, we're talking about a digital rights charter. At the core of that,
so laptops for everyone.
I would like to make sure that there is connectivity for everyone. How do we connect everybody who lives in a faraway part of Europe is the only solution for those rural areas, nothing except to move to more urban areas. I say no. Of course, we have learned over the past 2 years in the way we have rolled out new digital experiences and new digital services. But of course, we need to appreciate the fact that we rely, and this was in fact one of the questions we asked ourselves at the beginning of the pandemic, are we, for example, from an agricultural perspective, from an environmental perspective, self-sufficient in terms of providing, at the moment we are discussing our own electricity and heating needs, but also are we providing at the same time enough products and allowing our local producers the protection that they deserve because they sustain our societies so well.
That brings us to the question, do you see any need for more competencies for the EP, the European Parliament, so that the EU can really call itself democratic? Do you think you need more competence?
My immediate reply would be yes, to give more power to the European Parliament. This has always been...
Okay, which one?
I think successfully. No, I can tell you very, very quickly. I think, first of all, this pandemic has shown us that our competence for health could be beefed up. We have seen the best example of Europe when member states got together to ensure that the vaccine rollout, but even earlier, the medical equipment rollout and procurement was available to all citizens, irrespective of which member state they came from, big or small, north or south. But also this is something that we, and this is one of our priorities, will be seeking in terms of right to legislative initiative that the European Parliament has been promised that, and that is something that we will push for in the next months.
So let me come back to the pandemic. Just a question, European responsibility, concerning European responsibility, you need, vaccines and the pandemic and, for the world. What is European responsibility and how should Europe react regarding the world?
Now, I think Europe has been seen and shown itself to be a leader, not only in creating the vaccines, procuring the vaccines, but also distributing through the COVAX program an unprecedented number of vaccines with unprecedented speed. We have also seen, for example, models such as the COVID certificate being used in different parts of the world outside the European Union. So I think we have shown that we can be leaders in this area. We should continue to do more. It is never enough. I think the word vaccine diplomacy is not something that we would have used at the beginning of this pandemic. There were times when things could have been done better. There were times when things could have been done faster. But all in all, I think we can be proud of what we achieved. The next steps are too many citizens are still not vaccinated. Too many people in the European Union are still not vaccinated, and that has to be our focus and continues to be so.
Do you think it's a fair share, Europe, with all the vaccines and so say Africa, other countries and around the world? Do they need more help from Europe? Is it part of European responsibility?
Yeah, this Parliament has always been at the forefront of ensuring that more help is given to all countries that seek it. And in fact, this is something that I really should commend the European Commission in order to make sure that not only awareness, but the production and the provision has been distributed as broadly in a geographical way as possible.
How big, now another point, you know, rule of law is one of your big topics in your introduction remark. How big is the danger for the European Union being ripped apart by the fervent debate on the rule of law?
I think it's precisely the opposite. In fact, I think in a post-Brexit scenario, the member states in the European Union, and more importantly, the citizens of the European Union, look at the European Union as a shield to protect their rights. And it is this European Parliament that has been at the forefront, first of all, for pushing for Article 7, in other words, proceedings to be taken with regards to those member states where the rule of law has been backsliding, where rights that were fought so hard for to enter the European Union are quickly forgotten or sometimes ignored with no tools. In fact, at the moment, it is very difficult to use those tools with regard to those member states. This is something that we are going to take going forward. And what we have also pushed for is an assurance that the European Commission, because that is its role, looks at all member states equally and objectively, like it does on other areas, on justice, on fiscal matters, on tax competitiveness, for example, in the internal market. We have been asking for years, and we are finally seeing movement on that there is a rule of law scoreboard mechanism that puts pressure on member states to fix the things that need to be fixed. Some member states have heeded that call, some member states have not heeded that call. And this is where the European Parliament has taken a very active role, either in calling on other institutions to act, even on their failure to act, but also making sure that this European Parliament, and being reminded that we are elected, directly elected, and the only institution to be so, and that's our responsibility. And when you ask our citizens what they expect, rule of law, unlike before, is very much at the top of their concerns.
Are you afraid that extremists, especially on the right of the European Parliament, could hamper the work of the chamber?
I will fight against anybody who tries to destroy the work of this chamber. What the election almost 3 weeks ago, actually today, 3 weeks, has shown also that this Parliament can work coherently and together within the constructive centre, pro-European part of this House. It is that centre that will push this Parliament forward, because we are united in make sure that we will combat and counter any narrative that seeks to destroy our project and our values.
Digitalization versus misinformation and right-wing extremism. How can we make the digital space safer in that way? Because, you know, you face a problem with the right wing, and it's digital.
This is something that is increasingly getting higher and higher on our agenda, especially when we see temptations or saber rattling by neighboring countries who try to destabilize the European Union. You have seen that in the past and even currently, for example, with Belarus using human beings as geopolitical pawns to threaten the stability of the European Union. We are seeing it now with what Russia is doing or threatening to do on the ground with Ukraine. The message from the European Union is clear. Dictators and illegitimate regimes will not divide us, and it is that unity that keeps us strong. But you are right that we are fighting a constant campaign of disinformation and misinformation, and we need to counter the narrative, for example, that rising energy prices, and this is something we see in many member states, is as a result of the Green Deal. That is clearly being done to destabilize governments at both extremist ends of the political spectrum across the European Union, and it is up to us to counter that extremist populist narrative that is dangerous, but also threatens the fundamental pillars, as we have seen, of access to information, of digitalization that we fight so hard for, but that has to remain a force for good and not one that abuses and makes us unable to protect the most vulnerable parts of our society, such as our children.
Yeah, but do we need more regulation then?
there is always a very delicate balance between regulation that needs to be put in place and regulation that needs to be enforced. We find a lot of times that we have the tools on paper, they can be the best tools in the world, but we don't use them. Why? Sometimes it's lack of political will. Sometimes it's lack of opportunity. Sometimes it's lack of information. It is also this Parliament's role to bridge that gap between the moment when a legislation or a law, a particular report is adopted until the moment it is adopted everywhere. You will always find member states that are more reluctant. It is our responsibility, and that is also something that I want to, let's say, put more importance, place more emphasis on as President of the European Parliament, also in my relations and in this institution's relations with the European Council and the Council of Ministers.
Let's come back to money. There's a debate in countries like Germany and France about the so-called taxonomy. Critics of the taxonomy are hoping to find a majority against the green labeling of nuclear energy and gas in the European Parliament. And how big, you think, is the resistance to the delegated act in the plenary of the European Parliament? How big?
Well, the European Parliament has had a strong track record on adopting ambitious proposals in order to make sure also that our decisions also tackle whether climate change, but also see what is, let's say, more climate friendly, moving away from the old dirty fuels that we have been trying for decades to do so. The discussion is very new. The Parliament has up to 4 months to discuss and vote on the delegated act. I won't dare to predict the outcome of that discussion, but what I can tell you that this is something that also seems to cut across national lines. We are starting to see that a little bit more. It is a debate that is also dominating discussions at national level in the national Parliament. But again, the European Parliament has always been courageous to tackle climate-friendly proposals, even if sometimes they are difficult, and that is something that I will try to do, at least together with my colleagues, over the next few months.
2 questions, at least, belong to your new position. The European Parliament usually gets its greatest visibility on 2 occasions. First, when it can vote upon the new commissioners, and when it can vote upon a multi-annual European budget. But currently, none of these 2 things are happening. What would you describe as the greatest current challenge for you and the European Parliament?
I would not necessarily agree that is when the Parliament gets greatest visibility. What is, let's say, something that has been seen, that even though the European Parliament has for the past months been voting in a remote manner, you still have almost all, I can say, even within the current restrictions and the pandemic of members who physically are present in Brussels or Strasbourg for the debate when they take place in the plenary. I give an example. Last month in Strasbourg, we saw the commemoration ceremony of the late president, my dear predecessor, David Sassoli, with a packed chamber of members who came to bid a great European farewell. The next day, we had a very heated, active, very, very emotional at times, combative at other times, argumentative, but so pro-European across the board discussion on the current French presidency of the European Union. So the relevance of the institution is not only the calendar, I would say, but rather the content of the debate, the way you debate, and making sure that your debates and the timings of them are relevant. And that is actually one of my big challenges I have right now. But I have a very good team of colleagues in this House that have engaged in an exercise of identifying what can be done better, what can be seen better, things that have been maybe postponed for too long. And I think it is time that we grab that reform by the horns and go through with it.
Very good. Last but not least, because we have a deal, you come back to me and I come back to you, and we have a new discussion. Yes. Your personal visibility as president of the European Parliament. You know, you get some at the start of European councils, or as it just happened in January, when a high-ranking statesman comes and delivers a speech, like French President Emmanuel Macron speaks in the plenary in Strasbourg. So, do you want to change that role for yourself and the European Parliament?
I think a position is always what one makes of it. I have never shied away from taking courageous and difficult decisions or positions. This Parliament has not done either. And I have 14 vice presidents that 14. Are with me on this position. And this is what we are going to do. And I can tell you that we have a packed, not only legislative, but political agenda. Our visibility also in the member states will increase. And I think that, yes, you will have to hold me to task or keep me to task until next year, and we'll see what would have happened by then. But I think you will see much more visibility. And this is also because this Parliament will not only seek to be relevant, but is relevant and responsible.
President Metsola, thank you very much for your time. Next time, we'll ask you, should be Europe a federal state or a United States of Europe? And you can train on that. You know, we don't know your vision.
We don't like labeling in the European Parliament.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.